Welcome, everyone. I'm pleased to introduce today Dr. David Weinberger as today's keynote speaker. Dr. Weinberger has spent his career bridging the worlds of higher education and business. Having received his PhD in philosophy from the University of Toronto, he spent 6 years teaching college students philosophy, so he's well equipped for today. Dr. Weinberger left academia in 1985 and entered the corporate world at Interleaf, an innovative startup, as a junior marketing professional, and he became a marketing VP and a strategic marketing consultant. He's currently a senior researcher at Harvard's Berkman Center for Internet and Society, co-director of the Harvard Library Innovation Lab, and is a Franklin Fellow at the United States State Department. Dr. Weinberger has written 3 influential books that intersect business, technology, and society, including co-writing the bestseller, The Clue Train Manifesto, the critically acclaimed Small Pieces Loosely Joined, A Unified Theory of the Web, and his most recent work, Everything is Miscellaneous, The Power of the New Digital Disorder. So if you wonder why you're afraid of filing documents and would rather use your phone book as a stepladder than to look up names, read this book and you'll find out why. His next book, Too Big to Know, will be coming out soon. Dr. Weinberger has also been published in a wide variety of journals, including Wired, Harvard Business Review, as well as the New York Times, the Smithsonian, Foreign Policy, Salon, USA Today, and many other newspapers. We are indeed lucky to have Dr. Weinberger here today, and I invite you to welcome him to speak to us this afternoon. Hi, thank you. Oh, I'm so excited. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I should warn you that I rewrote the talk. Well, I'll tell you what I actually did. This is sort of a loosely gathered talk. I realized I have, more or less by accident, not more or less, entirely by accident, there were sort of 10 different things I wanted to hit on. And I completely reorganized them this morning because this morning, early-ish, it seemed like a good idea. And as a result, I have no idea what order they're in. So I will be only slightly less mystified than you. So I want to talk about what the internet, what the net is doing to knowledge. We have a very sort of deep and deeply fixed idea in our culture of what knowledge is. We've had this, we've been working on the concept of knowledge and its implementation for about 2,500 years in the West. So, we have a pretty good idea of what we mean by it. And in general, we have a couple of ideas come with it. For example, that we assume that knowledge is something that is in the possession of an individual. And if you get a new idea, then you may make it public, at which point it becomes in the possession of others. But knowledge is something that is tied to individuals. And as educators, often we want to educate the individual. Part of that is to pass knowledge to the individual in the West. I'll stop saying in the West. My domain here is the West. So just put that in brackets for everything I'm about to say. We have assumed in the West, I can't stop myself, that knowledge is hard-won. That it's not easy, and it's not easy to get knowledge because knowledge from its beginning has been about penetrating appearances. Things are not as they seem, at least most things. It looks like the sun's revolving around the Earth, and we know that's not the case, but that's the appearance, and we had to penetrate the appearance to get to the real knowledge. If there were no appearances to move through, then knowledge would be a snap. You just look around and you'd have it. But it's not. It's hard because of these appearances. Knowledge is not just some collection of facts and ideas. It goes together beautifully. And we've lost some of this sense. But for most of our tradition for the past 2,500 years, we've had a very, very strong sense that knowledge is orderly and beautiful, that the order is the epitome of beauty. And if we've started to lose that sense, it's only been in the last few generations, really, that sense has gone away. That there is a single order, and what something is its place in that order. And to know what the thing is to know that place in its order. And so we've had arguments back and forth for decades, sometimes centuries, about what a thing is, which category it goes into. We've also assumed that knowledge is settled, that if we're not yet sure, if people are still arguing, responsible people, a very loaded term, but if responsible parties are still arguing about a point, then we say we don't know yet. So knowledge is that from which disagreement has been driven. It is what has been settled. We have had this idea, as Senator Moynihan, this quote is coming up more and more these days, everyone is entitled to his own opinion, not his own facts. That knowledge has a basis and a foundation. It's an architectural model, that there's a basis of knowledge. We have very recently, in the past couple of hundred years, decided that that basis generally consists of facts. That's a very modern idea, but nevertheless, that there is this bedrock. And one of the reasons I think we like this quote so much these days, is, even though it's a sexist presentation, is that it gives us some comfort, some hope that, oh yeah, sure, lots, but if we just sat down, we can dig down to the facts, and then we can all agree, and we can live in peace at long last. So I think there's some comfort. This is like comfort food. We like this quote because it gives us this warm, glowy sense. And finally, we've had an idea of knowledge that it's possible. You can't get all of knowledge into any one place, but you can do a good enough job that it is a reasonable human project to engage in the pursuit of knowledge and in its aggregation and its dissemination and people's education into it. We can build a library, and we know that no library contains everything. Nevertheless, libraries are reasonable things, that knowledge can fit into a room, a building of a particular size, not too small, but also not so large that the building takes over the entire galaxy. So it turns out, I'll be fine in just a second, that most of these assumptions, in fact, tie back to a recognition, something that we've known forever, which is that the world is way, way bigger than what fits inside our own puny little brains. Individual brains just are not up to the task of knowing the world. The world is way, way, way too big for that. And our skulls don't scale. We're stuck with, the one single glob of gelatinous material, and that's it. And it's not that much gelatinous material. Brain, not whatever dessert will be. So. Well, okay, that's been a real and continuing limit on knowledge, and so most of our strategies for knowing the world that have dominated us over the course of our history have been strategies based upon handling the abundance, the overabundance of what there is to know by reducing what there is to know into what can be managed by our poor, pathetic little skulls. And chief among these techniques is to break the world into brain-sized chunks. And say, here's an area you can master, and an individual can master. Why don't you become what we call an expert in this? And then we can go to these experts, because this is very, very handy. This is a very important strategy. We can go to the experts, and we can ask a question. And then we can get an answer. And most important, we can then stop asking, because the expert, whether it's in person or in a book, has given us an answer that we can trust. And the reason that we can trust it, if we don't know the person personally, if it's a book or somebody on TV or whatever, is that that person has some type of credential. Even just having a book get published is a type of credential, or a university degree, or whatever. And so we have a second system of stopping points that goes along with our knowledge as a set of stopping points, namely a credentialing system that says, oh, what's the atomic weight of carbon? And the expert replies, we say, no, I don't think that. And the expert says, I have a PhD from Oxford in chemistry, and I'm on the board of, and then you say, oh, okay, sorry, I didn't know that. Yeah, I guess you got the atomic weight of carbon right. So now I don't have to go reproduce the experiment in my backyard, which would be an extremely inefficient way of knowing our world if I had to do that. So we have a series of knowledge serves as a stopping point with a credentialing system that serves as a parallel and interwoven set of stopping points so that we can stop asking and can move on. And this is a hugely successful strategy for knowing a world that's way bigger than any particular skull. And this is why we are the dominant species on the planet, for better or worse. It's because we have had this incredibly effective strategy. We have, however, assumed that this strategy is not simply a strategy, but is rather a reflection of the nature of knowledge itself, which it is not. Knowledge as a series of stopping points is a reflection of the medium of knowledge that we've had, which has been paper and books. We've written things down, and then we invented books, and we started doing them. Books are a hugely disconnected medium. I'm not going to bother defending books because that's not what's controversial. I'm going to assume we all really like books one way or another. But they are hugely disconnected. They have footnotes, of course, but to follow a footnote, you have to get on a bus, go to a major metropolitan city, hope the library's open, find the book, hope that they have it, take a pathway through the shelves, and then hope that somebody else hasn't checked it out, some other knowledge-seeking creature. It is extremely expensive to follow footnotes, to connect books. So we even as teachers and scholars, we very rarely do that. We very rarely connect the footnotes. Out of how many footnotes in the book do you actually, or an article, do you actually track down? I'm going to guess very small percentage, hugely expensive, which means the book is doing its job, which is containing within itself everything that you need to know within the topic. The author tries to anticipate your questions and your interests and to cover a topic that fits from here to here and get everything in there because it's so expensive for you to say, the book doesn't even talk about, or here's a question it does, and you then have to go to the other book. That's a very poor knowledge strategy. Far better, and the book succeeds better if it can encapsulate between the covers everything or almost everything the reader needs to know and puts in the right footnotes to serve as stopping points so you can just read the book and move on. That's how we succeed as a species. That's what knowledge looks like when it's in books. It's this broken up set of ideas backed by credentials, but it's not how knowledge itself looks. So now we're in a different era. We're in the era, we have a different medium. Knowledge, I think we will all agree, especially at this conference, that knowledge is moving out onto the network. In fact, it pretty much really has. The network is the dominant medium for knowledge already. And you can think about hyperlinks, which are the atoms of the network. You can think about them as a new form of punctuation. So the old form of punctuation tells you when to stop. The new form, the hyperlink, tells you how to continue, and then gives you, this thing that we've wanted in fable and in myth forever, which is a map that you can touch, and it takes you to where you're going. It's a representation of the world, but it will also take you there. Well, that's what links do. They not only show you the connection, they let you make the smallest possible human motion, which is, be happy to do it again. Decide you didn't see it. There it is. Decide. The smallest possible human motion, maybe short of blinking, in order to traverse multiple metropolitan areas, libraries of information. Links are hugely, hugely connective. And so while skulls don't scale, hyperlinked networks do. They scale beyond, we haven't run out of space on them yet, we're not likely to, and they don't only scale, they also link and connect and make that distance traversable. So I want to talk about 10, most of them are really brief, 10 effects this has on knowledge. In no particular order, or in order that made sense this morning. The first is something I think that we'll generally agree with, and if not, you'll let me know, which is the net is already the place that we go for information. We do that when we are doing research. It generally is the first place. The physical library is already the last resort. I'm sorry, I work in a library, but that's not just true for our students. Generally, it's pretty much true for us. We go there if it's not on what we're looking for is not on the net. Nevertheless, in many high schools, including our children went through a wonderful public high school just 2 years ago, and they were still being told, go do a report, which reports are a bizarre sort of educational formation. I don't know exactly why this seems to be the pinnacle of many. Nevertheless, go do a report and do not use more than 3 internet sources. Because the internet is a swamp of misinformation, according to this view. Well, yeah, of course, it is a swamp of misinformation. It's also a swamp of wonderful information. And it's vitally important, obviously, that our students learn how to navigate and tell which from which they will not do if they are only allowed to cite the internet 3 times in every report. But they will do far better if we assume that they, like us, are going immediately to go out onto the internet to find stuff, because that's where stuff is. Have them bring it back in, and grade 3, they should be doing this already. In my view, they come back in, and the class as a whole goes through and says, oh, you know, that's great that you found this, say, biography of Martin Luther King, but here's how you can tell it's from a white racist group. Because for a long time, the top result at Google for Martin Luther King was from Stormfront, which was, in fact, you had to read about 3 paragraphs before you realized that, yeah, this was a white racist group. So, yes, have them bring it in and make that a vital part of the education. In a hyperlinked world, and because the net scales, the old strategy of reductionism gets flipped, I think, so that the old idea was in multiple realms, whether you're talking about newspapers or textbooks or museums or almost any realm of human endeavor, tremendous value was appropriately put upon the act of curation. Which things are worth our attention? Also terribly subject to abuse, and most perniciously, the implicit abuse of the dominant culture within a culture being the ones who get to decide. Nevertheless, curation is and remains and always will be a really important skill. Despite what I'm about to say, I think even more important on the net, even though the act of curation is, there's a better strategy. So here's one reason why why we need to make a change. When Oliver Goldsmith, his entry in the Encyclopedia Britannica, the greatest English language encyclopedia until recently, when his entry was initially put in, it was written by Macaulay. So it was an important British historian writing about this important British literary figure. The original entry was 6,000 words. It was 1911. In the 1911 edition, it was 6,000 words, and then it was cut in half. Because Britannica has room for 65,000 entries. The world doesn't stand still, and so it has to squeeze more and more. It cannot keep increasing the number of volumes purely for economic reasons, if nothing else. And so it has to squeeze more and more. So the old entries get cut, more and more reduced over time. So it went down by half. And in the latest version, it's down to 1,500 words. So we're watching our cultural knowledge about Oliver Goldsmith vanish because of the limitations of paper-based knowledge. So this is from the editor who had to make the cut, who was not happy about it, but he did, of course he has to do this. One's encyclopedia grows less useful because what one wants to know is crowded out by things one doesn't want to know. By AD 3000, no doubt, dear Oliver will be reduced to a couple of lines. That's the price we pay for curating within a very limited medium. And the alternative has already occurred on the net increasingly, which is the first rule is include everything. When you're putting together some type of collection, the old value of curation was to keep the most out so that what was there was really wonderful. The new value is no, include everything, because the cost of deleting is actually higher these days than the cost of including. It takes more time and consideration to go through. That's why our hard drives are filled with photos labeled DSC129756.jpg, because it's really hard and time-consuming to go through. Deletion costs more than inclusion, and there are good positive reasons to try to include everything. I'll give you just 2. One is that if you were curating a collection of news, you would quite properly say, well, all this crap, I'm sorry, that's technical talk, crap. All this crap about Lindsay Lohan and Britney, that's not making it into my collection because we're trying to do a classy thing here. And so you'd keep them out, that news out, and you would thus have deprived this set of researchers from access to their primary source material on the media's treatment of female celebrities. Wasn't important to you as a curator, a reasonable choice, but you cannot predict what's going to be interesting to people. Nobody can, because we don't know what's going to be interesting. We never know what's going to be interesting to people. So include it all. And the second reason is that you, as a curator, cannot know what history is going to bring us. So in 2007, you probably would not have included the notes from the library committee in Wasilla, Alaska, because you did not know that Sarah Palin was going to be. Nobody knew. Nobody knew that Sarah Palin was going to be nominated, so you would have missed this important historical material because you cannot know what history is going to turn up. So include it all. But if you do that, then people need to have filters. They need to be given good filters for filtering on the way out, right? So that they can do their own curation and maybe do it in a public place, by the way, so that we get benefit of that curation. So give them very strong tools so that they can go through your material, decide what's interesting to them at that moment in their context, and find it, build it, and maybe even publish the curated list of what's interesting in your collection. So if we're going to do that, and we are doing that, by the way, then we need very strong tools. And those tools are for filtering, making sense, finding. Those tools are, it's too big a job for any one person. We can only do this together socially. But this, I think, actually has a fairly important effect on our very notion of what a thing is. So I just want to remind you about that our notion of what an apple was, our notion of what an apple is, was that it's a type of fruit, but it's different from the other types of fruits. And that's how we define the essence of apple. And it's very Aristotelian, but it's stuck in our culture for over 2,000 years. The thing is its position in this order. And so we have, not only have we had catalogers, we've had scientists having very serious arguments about whether Pluto is a planet, or is the duck-billed platypus, is it really a mammal, even though it lays eggs? You know, very serious issue for us historically and still. So here's a different approach. This is the Library of Congress, which has too much materials. It can't get to all the stuff that it has. So maybe 2 years ago now, a year and a half, 2 years ago, they took 3,000 photos from their collection. And these are color photos from World War II. They're quite rare. They're really quite beautiful. Her hair is very detailed in this photo. And they put them online so that, first of all, we could see them. They put them online at Flickr, which is a public spot. It's a proprietary site owned by Yahoo, but anybody can go to it. We can see these, but more important, we can also start to do the work that the Library of Congress simply does not have the staff to do, which is to catalog it. Because otherwise nobody's going to be able to find it. And the Library of Congress has a wonderful staff of professional catalogers. They can't get to all this stuff, so put it up and let us, everybody, use the tools that Flickr provides for tagging. And tagging, as I'm sure you know, anybody can provide a label, and you click on the label, you can see all the other photos tagged at Flickr that people have tagged that way. So people started doing this. They very quickly, in fact, Flickr only has 75 spots for tagging because Flickr assumed that it was going to be used for family photos, and that's a lot of tags for a family photo of somebody on the beach. For this, it turns out 75 wasn't nearly enough. So within a few days, generally, these tag slots filled up, and they filled up with all sorts of things, some of which were tags that a professional cataloger would have given. Woman and worker and 1942 and factory. Some of them were more idiosyncratic and maybe a little crazy. One of them was red, which I actually didn't notice how important aesthetically her lips and the probe are. They're both bright red. And so, okay, so now here's a tag that has affected my aesthetic judgment. It was sort of a critical remark. Somebody tagged this Rosie the Riveter. Somebody tagged it coif, by the way, which is why I mentioned her hair. If you're interested in 1940s hairstyles, you can click and you see a whole bunch of those. Somebody tagged it Rosie the Riveter. This is not Rosie the Riveter. But if you were interested in the history of women in factories in World War II, and you clicked on this tag, you would get this photo, you would get all the other photos people have tagged. It might be very, very interesting to you. So technically, that tag is inaccurate. It's wrong. It's false. It's a lie. It's a mistake. It's really, really useful, though. Really useful. So you click on one way to think about this is, as I say, this is an alternative to the old idea that you have to find the single way in which this gets classified. This idea about the nature of things is determined by their singular position in the eternal world order, not by coincidence, reflects the limitation of physical objects. If you had a camera, a digital camera, physical one, and a store, you'd have to figure out the single place to put it, because that's how atoms work. And you decide to probably put it on the camera shelf. You might put it somewhere. You might put it in sports equipment or fun or on sale, but you can only put it, it's physical. You have to pick one. And so it seems to me beyond an accident that our philosophical commitment to the idea that things are their singular position in an order, that mirrors the limitations of the physical, that seems to me to be beyond merely a coincidence. So now we're in the digital age, and we're not stuck with that singularity. We don't have to come up with a single way of positioning it. We can take these tags and we can treat them as actually sort of characteristics of the object itself and not have to decide which one this is really about, because it's not really about anything. What it's about depends upon what's in it, what our culture is, and what we're interested in. And tagging as one single technique, and that's all it is. I mean, it's just a single technique that we've developed for socially finding, making sense of, and making public what we've found within this vast, inclusive collection that we're building for ourselves online. That single technique seems to me to have fairly profound consequences, that we are seeing very practically the destruction of this age-old idea that the calling of humans and of human knowledge, which was our God-given gift and our highest faculty, is to determine the nature of things by seeing how they fit into the world order, that idea crumbles as soon as we're not dealing with physical objects. As soon as we're dealing with did I say physical? As soon as we're not dealing with physical, it crumbles. As soon as we're dealing with digital that can easily take on social meaning, we do it. And so the old card catalog becomes not only inefficient, it becomes in many ways a symbol of a deep philosophical dead end that we ran down for 2,500 years. Well, so if this is being done socially and Rosie the Riveter counts as a tag and that's inaccurate, then clearly what we're doing is imperfect. Right? And that's just the way it is. That's one of the prices that we pay, is that our ways of handling this vast collection are going to be imperfect. But to me, it's like ordering a beer on a hot day, which eventually we may yet again have. Not a good winter in Boston, and I hear not a good one in Cleveland. So you go into a bar and you say, man, I'd like a beer. And you get a beer and you drink it, and it's not the best beer you ever had. It's not the perfect beer. You do not slam it down and say, barkeep, this beer is not the finest I've ever had. I reject it, and walk out and go to the next bar where you repeat it, because that beer also is not going to be. But what you instead say, that's pretty good beer. And I think that's exactly where we are with knowledge, that we have become philosophical pragmatists. That is, good enough is good enough. If it's good enough, it's good enough. It's good enough, but that's good enough. And that seems to me to be exactly where we are, often to our distress, especially if we're coming from a culture and a background that says, no, there's a single right answer. But good enough is a very relative term, of course. So good enough for what? There's an implied for what. And so if you're trying to find something to read and you go to Amazon and you say, well, maybe a Harry Potter book, and you look and there are, 5,600 reviews, and maybe they're wrong. But all that's at stake is a $15 book and a little bit of your time, so it's not a big deal. It's a good enough system that Amazon has for helping us decide what next book to read. If you're at eBay and there's some money involved, let's say you're thinking about buying a small plane on eBay for $85,000, eBay has a system also that tells us, is this information good enough? And it turns out, 90% positive for buying an $85,000 item. Not good enough. Don't buy it. That's really a warning sign. So the good enough is very, very culturally, they're very dependent upon the context. And likewise, if you have just been diagnosed with diabetes and you go on Google and you do a search, you want to be very careful about what is good enough. Now, I was going for the cheap laugh. I did this morning. This is totally fake. Actually, if you do this at Google, you get pretty good set of sites that actually probably are good enough for you. Nevertheless, right, we know this because we're adults. The educational task is vast. But good enough is a huge educational task. And I would say much, much harder than the old idea that there, at least in theory, that there is a realm of truth that we know to be right. And we just need to have our students grasp those eternal verities. It's much, much, much harder to deal with good enough. Fortunately, we've all really been in the world of good enough all along. Our system of knowledge just refused to acknowledge that. So good enough, well then, fallibility for sure, but it turns out there's a type of authority in fallibility. So if you look something up in Britannica, you are right to believe what it says, but not maybe bet your life on, but very likely it's right because it's gone through, I think they used to say 517, something like that, editorial steps. So what's in there is very likely right. Simply by being in there, you should trust it. If you go to Wikipedia and you read it, simply because it's in Wikipedia doesn't mean that it's right. Of course, because you may hit the page when somebody trashed it. Now, I use Wikipedia, use it all the time. I'm a huge fan of it. I think it's incredibly important. So I'm not saying Wikipedia is full of lies. Nevertheless, simply by being in Wikipedia, that's not what makes it reliable. What makes it reliable are the set of transparency mechanisms that you can see, the discussion page and the history page and contextual pages as well. But one other thing, which is what I actually want to talk about very briefly, which is Wikipedia is very encouraging of the practice of putting in notices like at the top of this one, which tell the reader that the material in the article is not up to snuff in one way or another. It wants Wikipedia, in fact, over the years, increasingly, more and more of these warnings have been going in. They want us, the editors, all of us, to be doing that. And so there's a long list. There's well over 100 of these warnings of various ways an encyclopedia article can go wrong. And all of the warnings, of course, were also created by reader editors. So, for example, this article appears to contradict another article. This article appears to contradict itself. It doesn't seem to be worthy of an encyclopedia article. It needs to cite sources, and over the past 3 years, there's been a tremendous push to have Wikipedia cite sources. If you've been, I'm sure you've all noticed the increase in citation. That's quite conscious. It reads like an advertisement. It reads like a sermon. And most important, the neutrality of this article has been disputed because Wikipedia's prime directive is be neutral. Articles should be neutral, which is a very interesting concept that they've spent a lot of time arguing and resolving, and it's very interesting. So when you see these warnings about an article in Wikipedia, you immediately, I think, come to trust the article more. It's telling you the article's bad, something's wrong with it, not that it's bad necessarily, but be warned. And because of that, you trust the article and Wikipedia more because just looking at the page that Wikipedia is not trying to look all encyclopedia-ish and convince you of its massive authority and swinging through the world. It just wants you to understand your world better. And so if the information needs they want that metadata to be there. And so the fact that Wikipedia is so willing to announce its own fallibility actually gives it more authority. And increasingly, sources that are not comfortable with this most basic of human facts, that we are fallible, they will lose authority. And so the question to me is, when will we see this happening? It's, oh, damn, I lost the image. That's the New York Times. Imagine, if you will, the New York Times behind those. That would have been a much more effective slide. Damn. So, no fallibility here. Authorities that insist on talking in the inhuman voice of perfectionism. This is the New York Times. Today in Libya, those people will lose credibility. They will lose authority. Increasingly, the mark of authority is being comfortable with one's God-given fallibility. So we have this vast universe. We have fallible people. Anybody can contribute. And so the internet does not drive out difference the way traditional knowledge has aimed to. Right? It's knowledge when it's settled and disagreement has moved out. In fact, the web only has value because of the differences. If all the pages were literally the same, it would have zero, it would have negative value. The web has value because it has these connections. These connections are always connections of difference, and differences of every sort that humans can imagine. And so on your post, when you're linking, you say, here's a post that you will find amusing, or so wrong I can't even read it, or has some good ideas. You condition, you explain what the relationship is. This further supports what I was saying, and so forth. Right, so all of these different types of semantic links we make. And so we have a web of difference, and that is the sole reason why the web is valuable. It's at least a necessary reason. Without it, the web is just the worst sort of echo chamber. Well, this idea is so radically new in our culture that we have a medium that is so open to difference, even though we say as Western liberals, oh, we're all about people who disagree. We welcome disagreement. We hate disagreement. When we see disagreement, we can't stand it. And so we say things like this. People believe whatever they want. It's a swamp of misinformation. It's all echo chambers of people who polarize and disagree. It's making us stupid. We hate the difference in disagreement now that we can actually see it. We couldn't see it before because we had media that were so constricted and so curated that they drove out difference. We couldn't see the idiots who disagree with everything that we believe in. Now we can. It turns out we hate it. The net has unearthed, I think, a long hidden truth, one that we have just fled from in horror. And that truth, sorry, it's a pretty big buildup for something that's completely obvious. We don't agree. We don't agree about anything. Every fact on the net has an equal and opposite fact. There is nothing that has gone undisputed on the net. Nothing. So let me be very clear. I am not saying there are no facts. You should believe whatever you believe that makes you feel good. I'm not saying that. I sort of like science. The world is one way and it's not another way. Either that's a pipe or it's not. Although there's always going to be some disagreement about it. So what I'm saying is, yes, the world is one way or not another, but as a factual, empirical matter, we now know for sure that we are never, ever actually going to all agree about it. You're still required to seek out truth and facts. But we are not going to get to the comforting position that Senator Moynihan promised us. Everyone, okay, maybe, but we can't agree on what those facts are, and we never are going to. So where's the comfort in that? Even more distressing, perhaps, is that quotation. It's unattributed. Nobody knows who actually said it. Or if he said it, what exactly the phraseology was. Even that we are not in agreement about. This is pretty distressing. Nevertheless, it seems to me the unavoidable fact of anybody who spent more than 10 minutes on the net. So it's really important that these differences be made public, and the net has made that much easier by lowering the bar to publishing so far, which means that we get a new ecology in which we still have the old authorities, the old peer-reviewed, closed access authorities who only will accept a very small amount of material in order to keep their quality up. So you can pass peer review at Nature or some other such journal, and they can decide, well, yeah, sure, it's good science, but it's not important enough science, so it doesn't get published, at least in Nature. We will still have those sites. Those aren't going away, but they are being supplemented by open access sites like PLOS One, which is also peer reviewed, but it publishes everything that's good science, even if it's a small thing, even if it's a negative result. Because remember in high school we were all told that science, a negative result is as good as a positive one when your experiment failed at the science fair. Negative results, really important. Try to get negative results published. Unless it's cold fusion, it will not get published, except at PLOS One. If it's good science, there's plenty of room. PLOS One will publish it, and PLOS One is just one of them. Archive.org, another type of site that I'm sure many of you are familiar with, where you can post your work in progress. The metadata at the site tells readers how much they should trust it. What is it good enough for? So because it's there, you can publish data early and without cleaning it up, but you say this is raw data. And so people now know that metadata makes information free. It liberates the publishing of information. You can publish it early where it may be very useful so long as the metadata is there. And same thing for PLOS One and same thing for Nature. So we now have this new ecology, and by far the fastest growing side of it, because I didn't want to do a slide presentation without a bulleted list, so here it is open access journals, which are flourishing, and open access repositories. An amazing growth curve for these journals that make knowledge available to anybody with a computer, which also means anybody who can get to a library. This to me seems to be so radically important and so indisputably better that I'd actually like to hear pushback from someone about why this is a bad idea. In any case, it's happening. So because this barrier has been lowered to publishing, and because we can now have, we're learning to use metadata sensibly to tell readers the quality of the information that we're posting. So for example, at data.gov, and one of the very first initiatives, the very first statement that President Obama signed when he came into office was one about open access to data. Data.gov, which this is not, by the way, resulted from that. When you go to data.gov, which is a repository for government agency information, tons and tons and tons of it, the tab for data says very clearly raw data. They didn't want to wait for the agencies to clean it up, better just to get all that stuff in there, and so it could not be more clear. Raw data. You have been warned, you know that this is raw data, so fine, make good use of it. Metadata liberates information. Likewise, lower threshold of publishing, almost zero threshold of publishing, and learning to use metadata better. I've actually, at the session I was at earlier, I've heard some examples of exactly this sort of thing where classes increasingly are going online in order to publish what they are learning. They are learning in public, making it public. This may not be of tremendous value to the rest of the world because it's a 6th grade classes, but it doesn't matter. Well, it does matter a little bit. That's why it has to be clearly labeled 6th graders. It has the tremendous benefit, from my point of view, of implicitly telling students that learning is not a private act, that it's not simply for the benefit of the individual, that you are learning in order to make the world better. So learn in public. It's not simply about improving you. So there are lots of techniques. As I say, I've heard about some more this morning. But one of the consequences of this is that we have all learned, I think, over the past decade, if we didn't know it already, but now it's instantiated in our technology, that the smartest person in the room is not the person at the head of the room. Done correctly, it's the room itself. The room is now the smartest person in the room. That if you put people together connected in a web of difference, where they're not all just saying the same thing, but they're actually engaging in the ways that humans do, iterating over differences, that network of people is smarter than any of the individuals. And we've experienced this in our best classrooms, and we've experienced it on the mailing lists that we stay on, where there's a set of knowledgeable people, where it's better to be on the mailing list than simply to be listening to any one particular person. Knowledge is not inside our heads anymore. Never really was, but we tended to, it was too easy to think that way. Knowledge is not inside our heads, it's in our networks. Networks in classrooms, networks that expand beyond classrooms. And this is incredibly messy. So so we have to give up on this notion of brain-sized chunks that form themselves into disciplines. So if you want to know, for example, Britannica versus Wikipedia, which has more about a topic, we'll take philosophy. You go to Britannica, the Macropedia portion, 180,000 contiguous words. Starts here, ends there. Philosophy, 180, 3 books worth. You go to Wikipedia, last time I looked, it was 9,000 words, which is actually 50% longer than the recommended length for, so it's a very long Wikipedia article. And so clearly Britannica has 20 times the volume on philosophy, except I've left something out, which is, what did I leave out? The links, absolutely, hundreds and hundreds of links. So the Wikipedia page on philosophy, you know, it's Wikipedia. It's like every 3rd word is linked, which means if you want to do apples to apples, who has more in philosophy, you have to go through and start following links and counting the words in the linked articles, which means you have to decide which links you're going to follow, which ones are in philosophy. Some are obvious. You know, Hellenistic philosophy, sure, that's going to count. And Thomas Aquinas, yeah, sure, he's a saint, but he's a philosopher. Reason, absolutely, in Western philosophy, that's going to count. And then faith and reason, well, not so sure, because Western philosophy has argued for 2,000 years about whether faith is the summit of philosophy or the antithesis of philosophy. So you're going to, not to mention, you know, the topic of God. Is God part of philosophy? Well, you know, again, you're going to have some pretty serious arguments. So you're going to have to, there is not an answer to this question. You're going to have to decide what is in the topic if you want to do the head-to-head. It seems to me that this linked, messy structure in Wikipedia is a far better reflection of the nature of a topic like philosophy or any of the others than Britannica's neat 180,000 start here and there. If you wanted, if you were the proverbial Martian, you want to know what humans are interested in, you would do far better. You get a much better picture of human interest and how we see the pieces relating by going to Wikipedia with its 3.5 million articles, few of which are more than 6,000 words, than by going to the 65,000 articles in the print Britannica for all of Britannica's curation. Wikipedia is a better reflection not only of what we're interested in, but how the pieces go together. And what we learn from that is the pieces go together with links. And it's an incredibly messy web. So we've had an idea among literate Westerners that the pinnacle of human thought is long-form thinking. Long-form thinking, you all know what I mean. It's an argument. It's like this argument, but you extend it. You go from C, then you use C as a premise, and you keep going, and you go all the way to Z. You get to your point, and you bring your reader carefully from A to Z, and that's your book, right? It's a brilliant, brilliant notion. It turns out that it's a brilliant, brilliant notion, but it's not going to be the pinnacle of human thought for long. So I'm not saying that it's being replaced with tweets, that we can just throw out all the long books, reduce them to 140 characters and be done with it. But I am saying that I think that while we will continue to do long-form writing, and I say this as somebody who has another book coming out, so I'm sort of committed to long-form writing, it will not be perceived as the locus, the highest point of human knowledge and thought. We'll still do it because it has tremendous value. It's a way that one way we pull things together. But if Darwin were alive today, taking Origin of Species as one of the masterpieces of long-form thought. And one of the things, by the way, to notice about long-form thought is even though we all tout it, it's very hard to find examples where you start at A and you as a reader get all the way to Z without getting off the bus at maybe D. Usually around D, if we make it all the way to Z, it's because it's something like the Critique of Pure Reason, and we recognize it has historic importance, and so we get to the end, and we say, well, that was really interesting, but very few people get to Z in that book or other long-form books and say, yeah, he totally nailed it. That's exactly right. Yeah, man, no, you got to about C or D, and you say, yeah, well, boy, that's nuts. Interesting, but Origin of Species is an exception. It's one of the exceptional books. We actually get to Z. So take that as an example. If Darwin were alive today, he still well may write Origin of Species as a long-form work. 1859, the Isle of Wight. He sits there and he finally writes all this stuff down. It's great. I hope the web doesn't stop him from doing that. But along the way, during the couple of decades when he wasn't writing it, he would be blogging, very likely. And people would be responding, or whatever form. We'll say blogging, right? I know it's very it's very 2000s, but he'd be blogging or tweeting, have his Facebook page up. He would be surfacing his ideas in progress, imperfectly, giving them away, and seeing how people reacted. And people would react all the ways that they did after he published it at long last. Some would agree, they'd disagree, they'd supplement, they'd criticize, they'd object, they'd spin it off. They say, well, how does this work with what in my field? Maybe I was listening to something about evolution of robots. Maybe I'm in robotics, let's apply natural selection to that. They would take his work, they would apply it all over the place. He would see the actual objections to his work instead of having to spend chapters 6 through 11 devoted to countering the objections he imagined. He had to sit alone on the Isle of Wight and think about what his worst critics are going to say and then try to counter them. And he does a great job, but he can't do a perfect job because he can't imagine all the objections. He's imperfect. He's a human. So instead of having to imagine and go into sort of paranoid fugue state of imagining all his critics rushing, he would actually be dealing with them. And we would see this spread out over the web. And so even if he then published his long-form work, that work would have more value because it was embedded in the web. And people would talk about it and argue about it. The web, the smartest person in the room is the room. The web of connected ideas is smarter than any of the individuals, if we do it right. And by the way, we do it right at the same time that we do it wrong. We're never going to get it all right. It's always going to be some rightness and a sea of wrongness. So I've talked about 10 different sorts of things. They don't hang together very well, perhaps. And I have not talked about a huge range of issues, very, very important issues that face us as members of a culture and as educators. I haven't even touched on them. You know, there's a very brief list up here. But, you know, it's too big. There's just too much. We're never going to be able to encapsulate this. We can only try to find some ideas, talk about them at their tables once the speaker finally shuts up, talk about them in our panel discussions, talk about them forever, preferably in public, preferably linked, preferably with respectful disagreement, preferably in public, so that we can build not on only that with which everybody agrees, which is the old idea of knowledge, but can build upon this tormentous, is that even a word? Build upon this sea of roiling and continuous, never ending disagreement as our greatest strength. And so there's one characteristic of the web that I think should give us hope. Many, I think, but one in particular as educators, which is this sea of links that is in constant disagreement, that gets its strength from its constant disagreement. This sea is made up out of links, and every link expresses something that a human being is interested in enough to point away from her own blog to somebody else's and say, go away, read that. Here's a link. I'm going to make it easy. Smallest human motion. Go away from me. A little act of generosity, a little tiny act of self-sacrifice, tiny little act that is based solely upon human interest. So we've built a medium of knowledge that is only based on human interest. And the one overwhelming thing that we learn from that, I think, as students and as teachers, is that, man, the world is just way more interesting than our old medium of knowledge ever let us believe. Thank you.
I'd like to thank you,
sure.
David, for being both enlightening and hilarious as well. That was really great.
I wasn't intending to be hilarious,
No,
so I'm a little concerned now, but okay, thanks.
No. We have time for a few questions, so anyone who, I think there are people with microphones, right?
And I'd be happy to repeat. I wasn't trying to dash away, I just wanted to let you, eat, and talk. There's somebody all the way back there.
Run. Do you have a question? Here's one.
Oh, somebody has a mic. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you for that illuminating application of it. I searched for wisdom in your work, and I didn't find it. By that I mean, on my Kindle, looked at your book and found the wisdom word 9 times. And most of those were references to a title of a book called The Wisdom of Crowds. And yet, if you put together everything is miscellaneous and too big to know, I wonder if you think the meme wisdom has any value, particularly if it's reinvented, because it does seem to me that with wisdom comes some integration of facts and opinions, and also some recognition of limits, at least in many definitions of the word wisdom. So do you think we need wisdom, new or old, in the world?
It's hard to say no to that, although it's pretty tempting just to be interesting. My problem with I do have a problem with the word wisdom. I mean, it's a wonderful question. It's a word that needs resuscitating. I don't know how to resuscitate it. And one of the reasons, so I have a peculiar animus against the word wisdom. So I did spend a fair bit of time in knowledge management in business settings. I still do, where there is a ubiquitous, do you know the data, information, knowledge, wisdom pyramid? Is that familiar? No. To some, not to many. In the business world, it's very common. I think it's probably being written on a whiteboard somewhere right now. And so it's a pyramid. It's data, information, knowledge, and wisdom. It has an interesting history, which in fact my new book talks about briefly. that killed the notion of wisdom for me. So in the business context, this pyramid is trotted out in order to, we had all this data. We invested in data machinery in the 50s and 60s. People started to get concerned. There was so much data. Where's the value from it? And so people said, oh, you know what? Information, that's the reduction of data to what's valuable in the data. So it's a reductive strategy. We get information. In the 1990s, we had too much information. And so some commercial interests said, oh, you know what? There's probably a business opportunity if we can convince people that we can reduce the information to something finer, smaller, an extract of information. What should we call it? Let's call it knowledge. And I hated that they took over a term that I, with my philosophical background, cherish. It has a very precise, well, it's a very important word in philosophy, and it got taken over into something that is essentially meaningless. So knowledge management in the mid-90s, when it started going forward, its example of knowledge was the CEO's slide set, not your slide set. That's the information that we're going to be able to locate and spread. And so the term knowledge got completely, well, not completely, got severely corrupted. And then there'd be some hand waving about, well, let's go to the next step, and if we can reduce knowledge, we'll get wisdom. I've never heard a satisfactory, non-cynical, or even interesting definition of wisdom that's come out of that pyramid. At the moment, I still don't know. You've given one that I think is a useful one that has to do with integration. I'm fine with that.
If we reinvent it as your slideshow as collective wisdom, as knowledge that is integrated out of a network of people, then perhaps that notion of wisdom you might find more valuable.
I might. My first fear is that if we were to do this with good open hearts, within 3 weeks, somebody will have invented wisdom management. And there'll be consultants. In fact, that already exists. It's just they don't know that they're being ridiculous. Second of all, the serious concern I have about that is, yeah, that would be a great thing to do, but at the same time, the strength of the web is in its ability not to be, at least finally, reduced. Now, you're not suggesting that we do cream of web and get it all down into a handful of tweets and we'll be done. I understand that. Nevertheless, at the moment, I'm in an expansive intellectual phase. That is, I like the idea of expanding rather than going back to the inevitable and useful phase of simultaneously doing reduction. So I'm I want to swim in the tormentuous sea and make up my own words along the way. I can maybe give shorter answers, especially, that was a really hard, good question. Something yes or no would be good.
I'm really sorry about that then, because this isn't a yes or no question. But how do you suggest we deal with the disappearing links? Companies go under, their websites go away. GeoCities, thankfully, was cached and saved off, but that doesn't happen all the time.
Yeah, I was just told yesterday that a series of interviews I'd done just like 3 years ago, the audio, they're gone. They were on Odeo. Odeo is no more, so. Anyway, make personal backups because everything's going to break. I don't think that I haven't heard anybody have even close to a good answer for this. So the Internet Archive and the Wayback Machine is a public interest nonprofit that's doing the best that it can, and it's doing a really good job, but nowhere near actual backup of the Internet. I mean, it's just way, way, way too big to do that. We will lose links. There's no stopping it. And on one hand, that's terrible. On the other hand, there's so much stuff, So I don't think, not only don't I have an answer, I don't think that there is an answer to that. If something matters to you, make a backup and, probably print it out on acid-free paper and bury it in your backyard.
Are you vegetarian?
Yes. Next question.
So,
Thank you, Mark.
with that, let's, do you have one more question? Okay, one last question.
Hi. Hello? Is it on? Hello? Okay.
Hello.
Well, first of all, thank you very much. I really, truly enjoyed your presentation of what I called cloud thinking instead of cloud computing. Cloud thinking.
Or cloudy thinking.
Cloud thinking, yeah. I'm actually going to play devil's advocate, even though I love the concept of cloud thinking and what the network's doing. But I think that the more choices that we have and the more links that we have, the more cloud thinking, this infinite kind of way of thinking, it provides us people with frustration because they never get to the end, and also lack of confidence because they are not sure. And today we were discussing about creativity and innovation. And do you think, I'm going to try to make it into a yes-no question, do you think that this cloud thinking situation is actually interfering with creativity and innovation at a massive level, possibly? Thank you.
No, and that last part of the question actually surprised me. There is tremendous frustration. I understand, we are in a period where our systems are not aligned to, our old institutions are not aligned with the new medium, the new nature of knowledge. And so we necessarily we are still credentialing by testing, and testing individually. We're sitting students, we have the whole hippie class, I'm a hippie, I favor this, the whole hippie classroom, rearrange the chairs and everybody gets to talk, and then when they take their test, we put them back into a grid and face forward and, and time them, and then judge the school by the test results. That's a mismatch with with the educational movement in general for the past couple of generations, and very much with the net, where things don't come to an end. Well, in class, typically they come to an end on exam day, and everybody knows I think everybody knows that's the wrong message. It's now in almost violent disagreement with not only great pedagogy, but with the experience of the net, where there is no end. I wasn't expecting you to end with a question about innovation, since it seems so clear to me that this is a period of the most massive innovation in virtually every field that humans have ever experienced. We're making the Renaissance look, sort of Egyptian scale and heroic. That actually, I believe, is a word. In the age of the pharaohs, the speed at which we are innovating is just unparalleled. I mean, again, just reference back to the session I was in where Bernie Jim showed some students pointing at YouTube stuff that this is it's a very innovative period. I was going to say one other thing briefly, which is there's a book by Nicholas Carr called The Shallows. It's a good book. I disagree with it. I mean, it's really nicely done. Steven Pinker, who's a brain scientist guy at Harvard and writes big, good books about brains, responded in New York Times. Carr says, the internet's making us stupid by destroying our ability to attend to things. And Pinker says, well, no. Ask any scientist. If it's making us stupid, why does every scientist, literally just about every scientist, embrace the net as the greatest tool for science, for the rapid development of science and innovation in science in human history? And I think that's pretty much where we are. So, no. Thank you.
Thank you.
So,
let's give David one more show.